Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call a special meeting for February 3rd, 2022 to session.
All right, so just to give backdrop to the meeting, and I had sent some information, quite a bit of information to the board members earlier this afternoon. Last week, I prepared a draft letter based on the guidance we had at that time that had been based on the status of the mask mandate ending effective. At the time, it was either the 14th or the 28th because it still hadn't gone before the Senate until last Monday. It had passed the House of Representatives a week ago Thursday, as far as accepting the governor's proposed extension on I should say on the bill package that included an extension on the mask mandate through February 28th and ending at 1 second after midnight on the morning of February 28th is what I got clear distinction on at the last health department meeting. So based on all the information I had at the time, I had created kind of a draft guidance that I was going to send out to families last week because I know everyone's anxious to know what we're going to do in Plainville, and some towns have sent out guidance. Based on quite a bit of feedback on what I was going to send out in a request for a special meeting, I set up this special meeting for tonight. We had the long weekend, so it was, we had to wait a little bit. But we're here tonight to really to go through any last data points, some questions that still may be in the air, some new guidance that came out after we all left for the long holiday vacation. We had Thursday night, we received new state DPH and CSDE guidance, along with a invitation for a Commissioner of Education and DPH meeting on Friday morning, which I attended. I believe that was at 8:30. At that meeting, we went through that draft guidance they had sent out to superintendents and gave feedback on that Thursday night and Friday morning. From there, the state then refined, the CSDE and DPH refined their guidance they were sending out to do that they're going to send out. After that, the governor sent out a press release on what was being proposed for schools based on all of that guidance. So I shared that with board members, with our administrative team. But at this point, we need to give the people of Plainville, an explanation, and our staff, our students and families of where we stand as a district. As I've explained in the past, the mask mandate ends on Monday, February 28th. So that's for the universal masking. It was made clear that districts can continue to have some practices that, in the interest of safety, like in the nurse's office, things of that nature, that make sense on a local perspective. But any universal masking requirement would have to come from a Board of Education adopted policy. So one of the purposes of the meeting today is to determine whether or not, this Board of Education has an interest in pursuing such policy. I will be happy to go through the letter I sent to all of you if you think that would be helpful, or I could just go through on talking points from that letter. I could share my screen if you'd like and kind of go through it. I'm not sure what the board would like, or if you just want to have kind of a conversation and questions, that's fine too. This guidance is really prepared in advance so I can send it out tomorrow. A lot of this is really procedural guidance. It's not board policy. A lot of it's really more explanation where we stand, the data points. I will just touch on a few things. Our vaccination rates have gone up even since the last Monday, which I know Julie Simard, our COVID compliance liaison, was pleased with. I met with my central office team this morning. I met with our principals leadership team this morning. After that, I met with Julie Simard, Stacy Buden, and a number of things have happened today. So it may be best to I guess go through what would be my recommendation at the time based on what I'm hearing from around the state and based on our numbers. And I'm not sure what the board would prefer would be the best way to go.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
It's Cassandra Clark. I was thinking that since we have viewership, it might be best if Mr. LePage just does the presentation for a best of understanding, and that way we can see where everything's at.
That sounds good to me. Does anyone object?
Madam Chair, it's Rachel Buchanan. I like that idea. Can we also request that Mr. LePage, as he goes through each of the talking points, differentiate between what is mandated, for example, the busing versus what is guidance suggested? Thank you.
Sure. Steve, that's okay with you?
Yes, absolutely. And I can really tell you that the only thing mandated at the federal level is the requirement for masks on buses until at least mid-March. They're expected to make a decision on that around that point in mid-March, but that's really a federal level requirement. So the wearing masks on buses is something that's out of local control and even state control. It's a federal mandate. So that has to remain in effect and in place, and I speak to that within my draft letter. So I'll go through what my guidance provides. So let me just share my screen, and maybe Kevin, let me see if I get this right. I'm used to Google Meets, but I do both. All right, so I'll do, this is the one. Just want to make sure I share the right screen. Yes. Do you see the document, or is yes?
Yeah, we see the February 23rd, 2022. Steve, if you could just go to where it says 100% up here, upper left,
Oh, upper left. Oh, yeah.
click that and say width or fit.
Fit. Yeah.
There you go.
A little better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is a letter that I prepared to send out to really give a lot of detail and guidance around some procedural. What I believe as a leader of the district, we need to continue with some procedures, but also sharing that, that based on the state dropping the mandate and some data that I'm going to share here, that Plainville would be a mask optional because we've always followed DPH guidelines to the extent that we possibly could in our local context. We've done a good job with that. So this is just really the guidance. I know I'll go through some of the key points. So I highlighted some of the bullet points at the top that masks will be optional for students and staff as of Monday, February 28th, with a few conditional limits detailed below. Anyone wishing to wear a mask should feel welcome to do so. Nobody should be made to feel badly for their personal decision regarding whether they want to wear a mask or not. This is something that was brought up in public comment at the last Board of Education meeting, as our board members probably remember, and concerns, on both sides of, pro-mask, anti-mask about, kind of some of the issues developing around wearing masks or not wearing masks. And we just want everyone to feel comfortable with the requirement at the state level and DPH being removed. It's a personal choice. So we have to respect that. A free test kit. This is something that was recommended in the governor's press release, and then, through the DPH and CSE following that a free test kit should go home. They actually recommended 2, but we only have enough for 1 at this point. We're supposed to receive a delivery of them on Friday. Friday is looking very much like a snow day, so they've postponed delivery of the test kits until March 1st and March 2nd for Plainville area, Region 3. So Ron Divert, our fire marshal, was tremendous and has picked up all the other masks and test kits. We'll be picking those up for us. I was able to work with our reserves that we had in stock from the previous 2 shipments, and work with Steve Bussell, who I appreciate. And I worked with all of our principals in determining how many students and staff we have at each school, how many test kits they had in the nurse's office, from previous disbursements, and then getting them the number that they need in order to send a test kit home with every student and staff member tomorrow. So those will go home. This is not something that we're going to collect, a negative test result from everyone. It was made clear by the state. This is a recommended test that we'll ask everyone to test ideally on Monday morning before coming in, is what the guidance had shared. We're hoping that families will do this just to make sure that their child is, based on the home test has a negative result before sending them in. So those will all go home tomorrow, one test kit. Some of them are a double test kit, that has a 2 tests in it. Some of them are single. So we did have enough with about 90 test kits to spare. So those will all go home tomorrow. That was something that came out on Saturday, basically, over the weekend, as a recommendation. This is a data point that came out from a CAPS survey. CAPS is a Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, for those of you who don't know that acronym. But they sent out a survey earlier middle of last week, asking districts what they anticipated doing as far as masking in their district. Out of 124 districts in the state, that's about 124 is less than all of them. It's about 169, but it's a good number of districts that did respond. 90% or 114 districts plan to go mask optional as of Monday and not impose any new policies. And 9 districts are seeking to implement a policy to require continued masking. So it just gives you kind of a statewide perspective. Every town has different contexts, and you'll see that later on in the letter. Just some background data about Plainville. I shared this at the board meeting, but this is the updated data as of February 17th. The board meeting was on the 14th. Julie Samard, our liaison, COVID liaison, compliance liaison, is on the call as well. And so I'll go through all this, and if there's follow-up questions or details that I missed, I'm going to ask my team to please share if that's okay with the board. So this is the latest rates. Our case rates in Plainville, we're still in the red like most of the state. There's a handful of districts that are in the orange range, which is one step lower than red. We're pretty close, especially last week. Our cases were 17 cases out of 100,000 people as a ratio, compared with 45 the week before. So they've dropped substantially. We're hoping that this week, it's a 2-week average. So we're hoping that this week, if our cases are, say, 12 cases, we've had very, very few in the last several days. If there's 12 cases in the entire town, it would be 29 divided by 2 is 14 and 14. So we'd be in the orange range. So we'd be out of the red. That's what we're hoping. It's something that our local health advisor and our, medical advisor from the Doctors Treatment Center are both looking at that rate. The red zone is still being, problematic, and, an area that you'd want to consider, potentially continuing to wear a mask. Again, that it'll be up to individual, unless the policy is developed, but, but we're expecting to drop out of that red zone really soon. It's a matter of like a case or two is our hope, because 17, the case rate is 15 and below. To get out of 15 and above is the red. So if we get to the 14, so we're close, is my point. There's some links in this letter that will go out, and families will receive electronically. 39.13% of our 5 to 11-year-olds have initiated vaccination. So they're in the stages of becoming fully vaccinated with at least 1 dose. 33.39, that's up a couple or a few percent from 2% from Monday's board meeting, are fully vaccinated. This is trending upward, which is a very good thing. 66.89% of 12 to 17-year-olds have initiated, and 61.7% are fully vaccinated, also trending upward. There's a link to weekly town vaccination updates there as well. I've also included guidance mitigation strategies as a result of updated, so DPH guidance. There's a link there for that. The next paragraph is really about the survey that was collected from all of our families and staff who decided to complete the survey. That involved 1,160 responses in all. When I shared it with the board, we had 1,109 last Monday, but there are another 51 that came in. I shared 45 pages of detailed, I thank Sam Adlerstein for sending that to our board members last week for your review. It was kind of an even break of about 14 or 15 pages from each of the sections, why you're against masks, why you're for masks, and then open-ended that had kind of a combination of both. And so a lot of feedback went to the board members. So this is just, pending what happens tonight, this is my kind of guidance letter that's subject to change based on what the board decides tonight. But beginning on Monday, masks will be optional in school regardless of vaccination status. We'll continue to provide N95 surgical masks to any staff who want them. We have plenty of them, and we can get more. We have tons of N95s for staff. Surgical masks are still free and available for students as an option if they would like them. We'll have them on the buses if a student forgets their mask, because they are required on a bus. Even with this shift, masks, as I just said, are required by federal mandate on the buses. I know that that's something that some people are not happy about. We have no control over that. Masks will also be required in the health office and for students and staff returning from quarantine or isolation per the DPH guidance. Those days 6 to 10, it's very likely you could still be contagious, less contagious than days 1 through 5 and the 2 days before you test positive. But it's really something that was made very clear by Dr. Lynn Sosa, from epidemiologist from the state DPH, on the Tuesday meeting yesterday morning. I did join that meeting as well. And again, if you want to have your child continue to wear a mask, we're asking parents to work with their children and make that expectation clear with their children. With all of this, with 2,300 students in our district, we wouldn't be able to enforce that or have a list of who should be wearing and who's not wearing a mask. And that's something I couldn't ask our teachers or administrators to do. So it's something that we're asking families. We'd ask families to work with their children on their expectations. But, we've spent a lot of time, doing the, pull it up over your nose and, all the redirection that happens for all kids in the last couple of years. So that would not be required because it wouldn't be a mandate. Recommended testing prior to school. This is just about the test. So we're just asking that everyone please, it's a quick, simple test. I've done more than I'd like to admit in the last couple of years. But anyone who's tested positive within the last 90 days doesn't need to retest. That was made clear by the DPH as well. Positive case reporting would still be through our district website. That's worked very effectively. And, Julie and Stacy Buden, our HR director, and I and the principals have, especially Julie and Stacy, have followed up on each and every case and given guidance as needed to those families. Daily health screening, there's a list of the symptoms that to be aware of, and just kind of checking your health before you leave the door to come to school, or asking staff and students to, like you would do on anything else, if you're not feeling well, don't come to school. Isolation and quarantine, that there's no change to that, and that was stated several times yesterday. The isolation and quarantine requirements, staying home for 5 days if you test positive, and then wearing a mask for 5 days when returning, is still in effect. And we have plenty of home tests. I'm picking up, well, not me, but Ron Divert is picking up almost 6,000 test kits on Wednesday. Plainville's getting 66 more cases, so we'll use them if there happens to be a number of cases, 2 or more cases. No, actually 3 or more cases in a classroom. We would offer them and to the entire class, and ask that they're consider testing their child just to make sure there aren't any outbreaks. Working with our local health director on that as well. Vaccination, there's no vaccination requirement anymore. It's no longer in effect as of February 15th. No more weekly testing for those who are not vaccinated. I know that's been a point of some controversy and contention around the state and country, but that's no longer a requirement. That has gone away. COVID case notifications. This is, thanks Kevin Ross, our technology director, and I appreciate Julie helping me to initiate this over the weekend, because we really want to make sure everyone knows of cases that are in our schools on a daily basis. So we're going to update this every day by 4 o'clock with any new cases reported Monday through Friday. It's going to be right on our district website dashboard. Our COVID-19 dashboard is a button for that. And if you click that link, you'll see, there was 1 case reported at the high school today, or since yesterday. So that's, you'll notice that there's, and that'll be updated every day. Athletics guidance, there was a request to remove masks altogether, with a lot of data provided by the CIAC to the State Department of Health, comparing mask sports to non-mask sports. There's a whole study that they sent. I did not get any further updates on that. And I just wanted to, I checked with Athletic Director Farrell, and that it ended up becoming a moot point because masks they're not required after the 28th at a state level anymore. And there's no DPH initiated policy for masking at this point either. They've said it's really related to local risk tolerance, local feelings on masking, local numbers, and your comfort level with the vaccination rates, the case rates in the community, in the schools, if there's school spread. So there's just so many factors involved in this, and it's obviously become a very heated and controversial topic. I'm not an epidemiologist. I listen to them every single week. Sometimes I wish I didn't have to, because, well, all the time I wish I didn't have to, because I really, I just had an interesting email exchange with a parent who wants to focus on education. It's nothing I want to do more myself, but we've become, we've had no choice but other than to really become really accustomed and familiar and I'd say expert on all of this, almost to the level that our epidemiologists are, because we're living with it every single day. But I would say that I'm really encouraged by our case rates dropping off pretty substantially in our schools and in our community. I'm encouraged by the increasing vaccination rates, although they're definitely significantly lower than some of our surrounding communities. They're similar to Bristol and Britain, but and similar to Southington, but lower than Farmington, lower than West Hartford, lower than Cheshire. Some of those communities have much higher vaccination rates, which significantly reduces symptoms. It's, people are still getting it who are vaccinated and boosted, as I know all too well, but the symptoms have been reduced significantly from the vaccines. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of my guidance letter that I drafted. I shared with the board and our administrators, my administrative team, and Julie Simard and Stacy Buden, and especially added insight comments with guidance from health director and our medical advisor. So this is what I would recommend at this time. With that, I don't know if anyone on my team would like to add anything that I failed to mention. Julie, or if that's okay with the board, Julie or Stacy, is there anything else that I kind of gave a lot there? Anything else I left out that you want to highlight?
I think it's a good summary. Does anyone
Okay.
have any questions?
Rebecca, Ms. Martinez.
Hi. So it's clear when you would isolate. So say a child in 5th grade tests positive, okay? We're masked right now in the classroom. Who's quarantining?
There is no longer contact tracing recommended. We would still do contact tracing in certain situations. Julie, you could speak to that a little bit. But it's, the transition in the way the state kind of framed this is transitioning from a case-by-case, trying to reduce the case-by-case situations, individual cases, to ensuring that there's no outbreak. So really looking at the metrics that would point to an outbreak, and they're looking at hospitalization rates. And I know there's issues with that, as well as I've heard from you, Ms. Martinez, and there are still many people in hospitals, and although that number has stagnated and dropped in recent days, it's still an issue. Julie, you want to add anything more intelligently on that than I just rambled?
Yeah, a couple points. First, When looking at a classroom, there'd be a significant amount of students that wouldn't have to quarantine anyway. One, because they've been positive in the last 90 days, or two, because they're already fully vaccinated. The second point is that the state was really differentiating in our recent DPH meeting about high intensity contacts, really that being more, looking at that more in the home now, or something in the community where, say, students were riding in a car together for, a decent amount of time. That type of thing is what they were looking for nurses to really focus on contact tracing.
So when I was looking at our two guidance pieces, I did see where the DPH had stated about contact tracing, that when we had ended contact tracing, the main reason why we ended it was universal implementation of and strict compliance with robust mitigation strategies in all pre-K through 12 schools in our state. And when I went through our guidance, it does say, to consider our data with mitigation strategies. But I guess I'm saying I think we should be able to have some type of a clearer, in the elementary schools, we're up to 33% fully vaccinated. There's been 750 cases throughout. So that would still leave a lot of children potentially to be quarantined. No, there's been 750 cases in the district, and only 33% of elementary school kids are fully vaccinated. Would it then be every child in the class that's not vaccinated if they're not wearing masks?
I don't think I understand your question. Are you?
If
They're
a
not
child,
looking for us to contact trace or quarantine students who are potentially close contacts anymore. They have advised that we can move away from contact tracing. If we had an outbreak in a class where there were three or more cases, we would provide tests to everyone in the class and recommend that they all test. But that's really the big transition in that document shared, the guidance document shared by the state about moving to I forget the title of it. I have it up. I have it minimized up here, but transitioning to a model of routine respiratory disease prevention and enhanced outbreak management and control for COVID-19 in pre-K through 12 school settings. This is the document I shared with the board last week. Came out with the governor's press release, and it really speaks to, limiting some of the former practices of the quarantines, the contact tracing, recommending vaccinations, supporting anyone who chooses to wear a mask, even when school policies don't require it, following isolation guidelines for students and staff who have symptoms associated with or have tested positive.
so I'm still asking though, for quarantining, somebody tests positive in a classroom.
Yeah.
Moving forward, who is going to be on quarantine? What would your pointers be? Would it be the children that are not vaccinated and have not gotten COVID?
No, nobody. So based on this guidance, it shows here that continuing to follow existing quarantine guidance for students and staff who have been notified of higher risk close contact exposures, examples, household exposures, crowded social gatherings, strategies that would generally not be included in routine COVID-19 prevention include individual case investigation and contact tracing, and quarantine of students and staff in school and other lower risk, short duration, low intensity, close contact exposures. So I guess that's what I'm trying to express, is that they are recommending moving away from the contact tracing practices we've become so familiar with. And it's a definite paradigm shift, and I know it feels very strange.
Well, I just want to know, what are the nurses going to do when a child becomes positive?
That child would isolate for 5 days,
And
come back after 5 days with a mask.
And nobody around them.
Unless they're symptomatic, then they would likely get tested, and if they're positive, they would isolate. So the state referred to other viruses of the past and transitioning to a point where it's treated similarly to the, the flu and other viruses like the, my mind's blanking, but everything from the flu to HIV to, they're viruses that are still considered dangerous, but they're viruses that, we're used to living with and getting vaccinations for, or just living with, and doing our best to obviously not contract them, and taking the steps you can to prevent them. But
Mr. LePage?
yes,
Madam Chair, it's Cassandra Clark. I was just looking to be recognized.
Okay, let's see, finish saying what he was
Yeah.
saying.
I'm sorry,
Oh.
I do have a lot of hands up. I just noticed.
Yeah.
I think Ms. Buchanan had her hand up at the same time as Rebecca, and then if you could, I don't know, I'm not really sure. Who had their hands up first?
Cassandra, please go ahead. I'm happy to follow.
On Mrs. Martinez's point, I think what's very hard and scary and difficult is recognizing the transitioning. So we are actually transitioning to a model of routine respiratory disease. So we're going from a mode of a pandemic where everybody's worried about in an intense area where everything is a crisis situation. So we're going from a crisis situation to a maintenance situation. And in the maintenance situation, we look at things differently. So the outbreak is managed differently. And under the guidance from the Department of Public Health, the routine respiratory disease prevention enhanced outbreak management and control guidance that we were given, that is why there isn't the contact tracing. It's because they're taking a step back and realizing that the virus, the COVID-19, is now part of our environment. And it's hard when we've been part of this crisis mode for so long to feel comfortable in a different setting and taking a step back. The good news is, though, a lot of the mitigation, like the option to continue to wear masks, the option to continue to test, the option to get vaccinations, all those things are still available to parents, to guardians, and should really, those are great things that you have all these great tools and resources. But it's taking that leap to know that we are finally at that point. And we do have the guidance from the Department of Public Health to go ahead and take that leap. And it's not an easy one for, I would say, many people. But I think, I believe in my heart that we're really there. I also wanted to make a quick mention of hospital beds. In the state of Connecticut, I got from the HHS government government website that use of inpatient beds in Connecticut are at 75% right now. And the percentage of those beds being utilized for COVID-19 is only 4.16. And the ICU beds being used in Connecticut are 65.84%, and only 4.38% of those beds in Connecticut are being used for COVID-19. And that's really good news, because Connecticut is actually, of the percentage of ICU beds being utilized, we're actually a lot lower in Connecticut than the whole country. In the country as a whole, it's 14%. So Connecticut is much lower. We're in a much better place to be doing these transitionings. And I just want to give that vote of confidence. So thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you for sharing that data. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, who is next. If you want to, was it Rebecca? Rachel?
Becky Tyrell.
Oh, Becky.
It's okay.
So, I guess I have questions about other mitigation strategies and if they're going to continue. So are we still trying to keep children spaced apart as much as possible?
We are for the time being. Like the lunches, we're gonna keep them at the current distancing to, eating food and facing each other is, is one of the kind of the higher risk areas. So we're planning to keep that in place for the time being and assess case rates and things of that nature. All of this will obviously be monitored closely, subject to change, but it's that first step in transitioning. So we talked about that as a team this morning with our principals, and that process would stay in place, and that was emphasized by the health department yesterday. When you're removing one mitigation strategy, it's important to do your best to keep some of the other ones in place.
Yeah, so I mean, I know, common sense says that when you do remove one strategy, you shouldn't just, let a whole bunch of other ones go. And unfortunately, that's kind of, the guidance is so inconclusive and so weak that that's where we're at. So it's just unfortunate the way this happened, the way the guidance has very mixed. I know I was on a call with CABE with Department of Health yesterday and the CSDE, and they basically said, well, yes, we're saying everybody should be doing this. However, you really need to be looking at your district and your schools and what's different about your schools. And, living in Plainville, the most densely populated town in the state of Connecticut, with children with a lower vaccination rate than a lot of other districts, I think we have cause for concern. And so I guess, I had a few questions like, what happens now with visitors? Are visitors, when visitors come into the school, are they required to be masked? And how's that? Is that going to be enforced? Or what's the expectation, I guess? Do we know?
Yeah, we talked, go ahead. Somebody else was someone going to respond to that?
It's okay. I was going to talk.
Oh, yeah, the guidance was, it's if staff are no longer required to be vaccinated and not required to be masked, having visitors mask would not be something that we should require either. So it's kind of parallel to that. That's something that we were advised it wasn't necessary. Again, everything, I think if you were on the meetings, you heard the state say pretty much everything and anything is up to local decision now, which is really hard for districts when you're comparing one to the next. And, it's a wide gamut of what one district's going to allow versus another. So this is what we kind of feared from the beginning.
Yep. The timing of it was terrible. The guidance has been terrible. I mean, it's really difficult because as a Board of Education, our decision, our goal should be, making sure we're going to keep kids in school and keep kids and staff from getting sick, and control the impact on the community, because the kids will go home and out in the community and create a situation. And people have, been talking about how wonderful the schools have been, how great it's been to be in school. And I'm hoping that this decision doesn't lead us in a different direction. And if it does, hopefully people will understand that that was a decision not necessarily made by the Board of Education or made by, in any, I guess I'm going to say in any scientific fashion, because this is just not being done the way, it should be. And I don't mean that on a personal level in Plainville. I mean from a state level, considered, right across the board. So I'm just concerned about, what would happen, Steve? Like if what would create a situation that would have us have to go backwards, where we either had to quarantine a large group of people or had to go back to masks? Like, do we know right now what kind of metrics we would have in place to have that happen? How would we respond to something like that?
The guidance that we received, which like you said, has been, has been less than ideal from the state level, would be to work with our local health director, our medical advisor, based on our case rates. If we have an explosion of cases in a given school, it doesn't necessarily have to be the entire district too, where you'd say, oh, the whole district's going back to masking. But if you have, a classroom that has a high number of cases, or you could consider, or a school that has a big outbreak, that'd be something the board would have to decide on. Actually, it's not even really a policy at that point. It's really more of a procedural practice, to mitigate a certain short-term issue. That's why, like, wearing a mask in the nurse's office, where you may have some medically compromised children who are receiving, special education related services and that are required by IEPs. That's why we can require having masks, and it doesn't require a board policy to do that. It's really a practice we need in order to run our schools safely.
So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point, and this is my last point, and then I'll let other people talk. It's difficult. I don't think we should vote not to have masks. I think we go with what the current, I don't think we vote at all.
Right. The only that's, I think I tried to explain that, and thank you for raising that. But the only vote you would need to make is if you wanted to implement a universal masking policy, because that would go contrary to the guidance.
Right. So I think that, we have to, we have to go with, the fact that there is no longer a mandate. We have no standing to say that, masks should be, out there. But I do think we need to know what we would do and what the metrics are for having to go backwards, and what that is. But because it's going to be something just like Friday morning when we wake up, if there's snow on the ground, you're going to make the decision. You're not going to call the board and say, guys, do you think we should cancel school, right? So I don't think, please don't. I don't think that it's something that we would make the decision on anyway. It's, as we've talked about before, these are logistic, fluid situations where we need the person in charge to make those decisions. And that's what's going to make most sense. But I think as a board, what would make us feel better and understand things better is to maybe know what those metrics look like, and what you would, and we're not going to be able to come up with every scenario, because obviously things are going to happen that we have no idea what they are, but at least some ideas about how we would put that genie back in the bottle if we need to. Let's hope we don't, but if we do, how would we do it? So
yeah, it would be on a localized kind of spot treatment, if you will, basis. It wouldn't be all right, the whole district's going back to universal masking. That would be a board policy, that would have to be implemented and voted on and approved for everyone to wear masks for any period of time. But if there's a classroom or a school that has an outbreak, and we think it's in the best interest of safety to temporarily have them go back to masking for a period of time as a precaution, that'd be something I'd obviously share with the board and consult with our medical advisor, with Julie and I, and our nurses, and consult with the medical advisor, Dr. K, as well as Sue Longsack, the health director, local health director, and the state. So they didn't really give us great guidance on metrics, Becky, to be quite honest. They said, it's going to be like everything else. It's going to be you working with your local health director to determine if they believe there's some kind of an outbreak, and what steps should be taken to mitigate those, that outbreak. We're hoping that doesn't happen, but I'm prepared for, if I've learned anything over the last few years, be prepared for anything, because you just don't know what's going to happen day to day. So we're prepared for that. I can't give you like hard and fast numbers, like if we have 5 cases in in a classroom or something like that, we'd obviously, like I said, we'd have everybody test in that classroom. We'd notify them that there are a number of cases and please test your child. And, we take steps to meet with the DPH at a local level. But as far as going backwards and doing the universal masking, it would have to be pretty significant. When the director of the state DPH was asked that question, she said it would have to be a significant event where hospitals are bursting at the seams. There's no beds. There's a major statewide outbreak, similar to when Omicron first hit, something of that nature. That was what we heard from the director of public health last Friday. She joined the meeting with the commissioner. That was her guidance. So it seemed like it was improbable that would happen on a universal level, at the state level or a DPH or a CSD level. So, again, we take it on a case-by-case situational basis and make the best decisions we could in the interest of safety of our kids and staff. That's not a great answer, but it's the best one I can conjure up at this time. It's really all we know. There's a bunch of hands up, but I'm not sure which ones are new or old. I think Foster's are actually, Rachel, you had your hand up for a while and you've been in line. So did you already ask your question?
No, Mr. LePage, I didn't. Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions, if that's all right. First off, I would just like to say thank you. The information provided has been superb. The survey feedback was excellent to filter through and go through and to hear from families, guardians, and parents. It was overwhelmingly in favor of making masks optional and being in favor of the mandate ending. So I'm glad that the mandate's ending since that's what was, hoped for by the majority of the feedback. I, like Becky, have some concerns about the future risk mitigation. I am pleased that the guidance is putting it back into parents' choice, that we're looking at this from a flu perspective, going back to basic responsibilities, keep your child home if they're sick, the normal protocol. I guess some of my questions around mitigation, and just for my own understanding, I want to make sure I'm clear. So for example, into the nurse's office, I understand the reasons that you're explaining as to why that might be a good reason to do that. I just want to understand, is that a requirement or is that a strong suggestion? And the same with the 6 to 10 day masking upon return from a quarantine. Is that guidance, strong suggestion, or something that we are going to require? And what is the difference and who's requiring it? And that's my first question.
That's something I would require as a superintendent for an operational safety perspective. We have a nursing shortage, first of all. Our nurses see lots of sick kids. So having kids who are not well coming into their office throughout the day, there are kids who also go to the nurse for, specialized procedures, students with special needs, with different procedures that have to be done who can't wear masks, who are also at the nurse's office at times. So those two reasons for the masking in the nursing office, and I know many districts of superintendents I've spoken with are doing the same thing. I know Southington is, other districts in the area. It's something that is pretty common, and we have the the right to do that. That was made pretty clear by one of the things that was made pretty clear, not much was, but by Tom St. Louis in the state about we have that flexibility to implement masking requirements in situations and settings that we believe it's prudent and important to do so. The nurse's office is one. The 6 to 10 day requirement post isolation for having COVID is another one that the CDC and the DPH are very clear that requirement is still in place. It's not mandate based, but it's best health practices based and something that we were told we should definitely do. I'm not sure, Julie, if I'm framing that correctly, if you heard the same thing I heard, but it did not come across as something that's optional. Dr. Sosa was very clear that the same isolation and quarantine and mask requirement after returning from isolation based on the latest iteration of that guidance, is still in effect. So I don't know if I answered your question or if that's what you were,
I guess whether I agree with it or not, or the constituents agree with it or not, I guess what I'm trying to drill federal, not a darn thing any of us can do about that. The CIAC sports guidelines, nothing in our scope and scale that we can do. I guess when I'm posed the question by someone who says, do I have to? It is required, is it mandated, and by whom to send my child back after the 5 days of quarantine in a mask? Do they have to? Is it a hardline have to mandate requirement? And I'm trying to navigate and differentiate between what is guidance suggested and nice to do because we could be or should be doing that for whatever reasons, or a have to do. And if it's a have to do, who is saying it's a have to do?
Especially when it's a parent's decision and a parent's choice. I mean, there needs to be that that line of communication, because this is about what parents want for their children. And we're definitely going to need to have some guidelines, because what are you going to do if a parent says, no, I don't want my child to wear the mask for 5 days after he or she comes back to school? Then how does that work? What's that going to look like?
They would come after the 10th day of school, would be my understanding. I'll check with the Department of Public Health, but it was a clear point made by, the expert, and telling us that this is still in effect. That hasn't changed. It's in our guidance letter because of that reason. We're told that.
But that's guidance. It's not mandated.
It's guidance based on health experience with COVID and case transmission rates, and reducing the likelihood of it being transmitted within that time of that likely contagion is still in effect. So
are we going to offer children school from home for those people who don't want to participate in mask wearing once they come back? I mean, can they join the classroom? Can they, join the classroom from home?
That's still in effect. The isolation related COVID cases, that's still the structure that they're allowed to stream into those classes, and obviously get any work that they miss through Google Classroom and other Seesaw platforms, that as we've done throughout the last several months this year. But I get that it's controversial, and I get that there's mixed opinions on that, and I'm right in the middle of a vice being squeezed from both sides. But when the director, the head epidemiologist from the state is saying you absolutely should continue to do a 6 to 10 day masking after returning from isolation, that's, as a superintendent, that's what I have to go by in my strong recommendations. And I would have to get some kind of a verification of that there's a possibility to. I think parents would be very uncomfortable. I would, as a parent, if someone's coming back and still likely contagious and no one's masked and going to be in close proximity in schools. I could see that being more concerning.
Well, if they're coming back and they're asymptomatic and they have had no fever for 48 hours,
again, just I have to follow the health director's guidance. There's a lot of opinions on things, but I can't listen to every opinion. I have to listen to the people that are experts.
Board come in to all of this then? Where is our where's that line between what does the state want from us as a Board of Education? And especially you've had all this experience, and like you said, there's definitely many different opinions out there. How do we know where
the board's role is to, as I've told you in the past, to hire the superintendent, hopefully trust the superintendent to do the very best he can for the district, evaluate the superintendent and fire me if you don't want me, and also to set policy for the district. That's the Board of Education's role. If you want to set a policy, there's no policy to set to remove masks. They're already gone. February 28th, they go away. There are certain conditional situations in the best interest of the district that I, as the leader of the district, and would be requiring for the district, based on direct guidance from the head epidemiologist from the state in alignment with the CDC, to reduce the risk of infection to those in the classroom who would be around in close proximity to the student who's coming back positive. If they give me guidance saying I don't need to do that anymore, then that's the guidance I would follow. But as of Tuesday, that was very clearly stated, and Julie, you were at that meeting as well. If I'm misspeaking, please correct me, because I don't want to make a fool of myself, but that was exactly what I heard from them. This is still in effect. It should be followed. To not follow would be in, direct contrast to the leading experts who have been advising us for the last couple of years. So I'm not sure what else I could say about it. That's, the board can set a policy to have universal masking. That's really the board's role in masking at this point. As I've explained in the past, it's the board can decide to do a universal masking policy if the majority of the board wants that. I don't believe that's the case, but as far as the little nuances and transitioning out of this safely, I'm asking the board to trust me, as I have for the last, couple of years through this nightmare. And we've done very well. And I'm proud of the work we've done as a district. And I stand by just about all the decisions. I've learned from some less than, perfect ones, but I'm proud of most of them. So, and I don't make any decisions with haste or any kind of agenda. It's just what I believe is best for the district. So that's all I'm asking. But it's up to the board.
Thank you, Mr. LePage. You actually answered in that. I got my question answered. This isn't about feelings or opinions at all. This is about very specific questions that I'm receiving from people in town, trying to understand and differentiate between guidance and, mandates, which mandate is ending. There is no more mask policy. It ends, like you're saying. If we wanted a policy around masking, that would be something that we would take up as a board. I think that gray area, and where a lot of the questions that I get, and I really need to be able to answer them precisely, is what are strong suggestions, regardless of who they are coming from and their level of expertise. What is guidance and or a strong suggestion versus what is a have to do? So I think that's where some of the confusion has been. And I think to make this less muddy waters, for us to be able to speak very clearly to that is important. So it sounds like, and I just want to make sure I understand, it sounds like the mask mandates and there's masking is optional. Based on, and I've attended many of the Tuesday morning meetings as well since November. And I'm often left with more questions because there is a lot of guidance, but I don't always get the scientific data to back it up. There's not always a lot of time. So that's why I'm asking very specific questions. So it sounds like the nurse's office, the 6 to 10 days, those are strong suggestions coming from CDC, DPH, that you, Mr. LePage, as the superintendent, are choosing to put into place as requirements. Now, again, to drill that down, at this point for guidance, Becky had brought up, sitting and other risk mitigation strategies. Ripping the Band-Aid off to go to no risk mitigation is alarming and concerning to some, whereas some parents just want it over and just optional and leave us alone. And somewhere in the middle in all of that survey feedback is the solution, which is what we're trying to get to here, best for our Plainville community schools. So I guess my question at this point is, for future risk mitigation strategies like that seating and spacing, that's based on suggestions and guidance, but also not a have to do. And if that's who at the end of the day is fully responsible for deciding moving forward, is it the Board of Education in conjunction with you, Mr. LePage, on how to manage this risk mitigation? Is it completely turned over to you, or the board, if we were to write policy in the future, we would be able to have oversight over future risk mitigation?
So there's a lot there. I would say similar to what I had stated, that I would ask the board to trust me to continue to work with our case rates, our numbers, our experience in the schools on a minute by minute, day by day basis. I see it all, I hear it all, I get all the data in real time, and then making any decisions about reducing. If we have no cases or very few cases over a period of time, then I would advise, and I'd notify the board that I'm going to advise our principals and our staff that we can lighten up on some of the other, the distancing mitigations. There's really not a lot more. We have, we're still running our HVAC systems at the high refresh rates that are energy inefficient and cost us more money. But in order to keep our air refresh rate and purified using our MERV3 filters, we have some of the best in our district. We have some of the best systems in place to, for that reason. And we're kind of, I guess I would say we're cutting edge in that area. So that's going to continue. That's a mitigation strategy. Our, availability of testing and individuals choosing to vaccinate, which we hope will continue to increase. Those are mitigations. The things we actually have control over as mitigation strategies are really, it's how far we spread kids apart, and that's pretty much it. That's other than, our HVAC systems, unless I'm missing something else, Julie. My mind's a bit mushy, or any of my principals, feel free to share. But as far as cohorting, we're not doing a lot of cohorting anymore. But there's just not a lot that we're requiring or that should be impacting students' experience in schools. I know that some will continue to wear masks by choice. Some will decide not to wear masks. A lot of that's reflective of what the parents believe sometimes. I know children who wear masks when they're not even asked to by their parents. So, my own included sometimes, and other times they don't. So if they don't have to, but it's there is a lot of personal choice involved, but the things that I'll continue to follow the data and how we're doing as a district and recommending any additional reductions in mitigation strategies.
Thank you. And then my final thing is just more of a point with, us now after 2 years and with our vaccination rates, seeing that vaccinated or unvaccinated, you can get it and spread it. At this point, I really, one of the most powerful things that I've been hearing from folks is really not wanting to see, very limited contingencies around masking, very limited reasons as to why. Those things that you said that we can control, really putting it back into parents' choice, limiting, discriminatory language like unvaccinated versus unvaccinated, vaccinated, unvaccinated, really limiting that type of language, limiting the segregatory policies. This is really the thing. Getting back to education, I think someone said it at the beginning of the call, getting back to education, parent choice, and getting these kids back to normal. So I just really wanted to emphasize that. And then I think many of us are on that same page, if not all. Thank you.
Foster, you've had your hand up for quite some time.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I first I want to say I think that letter you have presented to us is well written, and but I do have one point of clarification on it. Where we refer to fully vaccinated, are we referring to an individual who has just received 2 vaccinations, or if they're eligible for a booster, they are then boosted? I think we ought to clarify what the term fully vaccinated means.
That's a good point, Foster. I believe it's just the 2 doses. I don't think they've changed it to the 3 as being fully vaccinated yet. They've talked about it. Just the 2.
That I think can be misunderstood, and that. Other than that, I think the letter is very clearly stated, and it states a reasonable position, and it does give you, and I think we should have. It gives you the authority that we are entrusted to you, and it has been very capably carried out these last 2 years, and before that, really. But I mean, just as far as the COVID is concerned, so that I think these decisions, just like a decision for a building to go yellow or red, they certainly do not go to the board for that. And I think that these situations, as they come up, we are relying on you and your team to carry them forward. And I think this is what we should be doing.
I appreciate it. I can put a clarifier in there with the number of doses to be fully, 2 and a 2-dose regimen or whatever, something like that. And I appreciate the trust. It's not something that I cherish. This is not something I enjoy doing at all. I'd rather have someone else have to make the decisions and take the heat for those decisions, but I've kind of held that position, and many superintendents have done the same thing throughout the pandemic. Some have had more, lots and lots of board meetings and had more, I guess, more board oversight of each of the decisions, but it's been advised against that from the beginning because sometimes decisions have to be made really, really quickly. And, the hope is that the board trusts me to do it. I want everybody to be safe. I'm not someone who goes overkill or does more than I think is necessary. I try to find a moderate position, protecting safety while also respecting different positions. So I do my best with that. I want to keep everyone safe. I want to keep everyone in school. If anybody said I don't care about kids, I call them a liar. And I care about our staff a lot too. So, I'm going to do the best that I can to find that balance. We'll provide whatever we can to make people more comfortable who, want more layered mitigations. But, it's time. There's a lot of statewide pressure to reduce the mitigations in place, especially masks. And, we're going to have to monitor closely and assess and, make changes if we have to based on what happens. But at this point, we're doing the best that we can with what we know and hoping for a good outcome. I don't know if there's other questions, or I also shared with the board a flow chart that Stacy and Julie updated for me today with the decision tree that we've used throughout the pandemic as to what to do for positive cases and based on different, scenarios, vaccinations or not. So that's updated. That'll be shared. My hope is to share all this tomorrow morning so that, we can let everybody know where we stand as a district. Yes, Mrs. Martinez.
Hi. So yeah, I asked my question and that was the first question. I said but we moved along and I didn't want to interrupt.
Sorry.
No worries. I'd actually spent some time just kind of writing up my thoughts, and just to keep myself focused, I just wanted to take a minute to read that. It's not that long. Our students deserve to be mask-free. It is not normal for them to have to wear masks every single day in school. They deserve to go back and experience school as they did before the pandemic. The state allowed every town to look at their own data and analyze it. As Board of Education members, it is our responsibility to do our due diligence, to weigh every decision thoughtfully and carefully, to listen to our constituents and to the guidance by DPH, Connecticut State Department of Education, to make the best and safest decision we can. Unfortunately, after looking over the data, I strongly believe if this board is in agreement for masks to be lifted at this time, it will merely result in a mask vacation versus going back to normalcy. We owe it to the children, staff, and community to transition in a way that gives the students the best chance at a permanent transition. Our vaccination rate for kids in kindergarten through 6th grade, or ages group 5 to 11, is 33.39% fully vaccinated. And between ages 12 to 17, it's 61.77. As of yesterday, our town is still red with a rate of 25.3. We also do live in a highly dense community, way above the state rate. We have 1,826 people per square mile compared to the state average of 644 people per square mile. And that is something to take into consideration. The Plainville schools have worked really hard to keep their doors open and have done so successfully due to the strong mitigation strategies in place. We have all seen the numbers go right up after every vacation break. Our numbers show we are not there yet. Hearing the words mask-free sounds wonderful to everyone, but we must understand what will have to go along with that. we have been able to quarantine fewer and fewer students due to our mitigation strategies. Currently, mask use prevents many students from having to be quarantined. Now that masks will be in place, either students that were exposed will not be quarantined, leading to more cases, or students will be quarantined often, especially at the elementary schools where the vaccination rates are the lowest. If our infection rate goes up, do we have a plan to cover staff, our obligations to IEPs? How much learning loss would be there? The data from the American Pediatric Association, CCMC, DPH, and CDC all agree that low vaccination rates in communities with high infection rates equals increase in COVID cases. This masking decision not only impacts our students, but impacts the entire community. All of these students go home to their family members who will now be at higher risk of exposure. Current hospital capacity at the Hospital of Central Connecticut, according to the state DPH website, is 80.1%. And Hartford Hospital is at 84.4% for regular beds. So as infection rates rise and hospitals increase, limited beds means just that, limited beds, whether it's for COVID, heart attack, stroke, or anything else. I understand everyone's frustration. As a nurse that has been working with COVID patients the entire pandemic, and as a mom, I completely get it. This is a decision that should not be made by emotion, but facts. I really wish we would consider keeping masks in place and reevaluating on April 15th. By then, we will be in the spring. Kids will have more opportunities to be outside in space. It will give us time for our infection rate to continue to decline, see if the BA2 variant turns into anything, and most importantly, we can look at other districts and see how they are doing. Hindsight is 2020, and we have the ability, if we just continue to be patient, we will be able to look at districts that are similar in nature to ours and see how it works out for them and give our kids a better chance of this being permanent rather than a mass vacation and dragging them on this emotional roller coaster by acting prematurely, knowing the data does not support our emotional-based decisions. And one more question that came up while they were talking. I know that we're not doing contact tracing, as I'm hearing. How are the teachers going to know which students have to wear masks when they return and keep track of even that if there's no contact tracing or quarantining?
Contact tracing, well, the students who are isolated and have been home for 5 days, their teacher's going to be made aware so they can support them. And when they come back, they'll have 5 days of wearing a mask.
And make sure that they're wearing their masks. Okay, and just, I did look up the quarantining guidelines and I haven't seen that they've changed to state anything that says we have to no longer quarantine. I saw that sentence that you saw, but all throughout the guidance on both sheets, it's made very clear that we are to look at our district's data and decide mitigation strategies and, you know, including mask and other mitigation strategies, but it should be based, the state gave us the ability to do it based on our situation. So, you know, I would really hope quarantining would be looked at because we know better personally in our town.
And we'll continue to work with Susan, our local health director, and any, you know, we'll see what happens with case rates. I hope they continue to go down dramatically. You know, if things change, we'll have to make adjustments and change as well. I just feel that, you know, I know there's a lot of data and some of it's not favorable, some of it is favorable. It's not perfect. I feel that I read the survey information as well. I received, you know, as I've told you, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails passionately written, some in favor of masks, some in favor of obviously removing masks. So it's been a mix, but, you know, more have been in favor of removing it. You know, when I go out to the schools, which is a lot, you know, I see masks, I see the masking, you know, compliance has really dropped off as well. You know, and I think you see it if you watch any athletic contest in a high school, you see the masks, you know, it's like a chin strap on a football helmet now in basketball. But, they're not being worn the right way. It's constant reminders to put them up, and it's not a reason to give up on it in itself. But my point is that they've become less, especially at the secondary level, middle and high school, they've become less effective because there's a lot of mask fatigue and frustration, and kids don't want to wear them. I had students, I was visiting I was visiting the middle school the other day, and I had kids come up to me and ask me to please get rid of the mask mandate. So there's still this perception that I'm all powerful and I can change all this on my own. I'm not that powerful, as you know, but that's the perception, that I can get rid of it. We're so tired of it. And of course, the mask was down to here, and our teachers try their best. Our administrators try their best. It's a losing battle at this point. So it hasn't been like perfect mask compliance for a while now. I've noticed a slip on that anytime I'm out, which is quite a bit, and it's become an ongoing, I don't want to call it a power struggle, but it's a difficult thing to continue to reinforce. I don't know if Mr. Lewandowski, I'm sure our principals could attest to that as well. They're seeing, less compliance with it. So I don't have all the answers. I would say that based on all the data that we have, all the risk tolerance that, was brought up by the health department many times, what's our risk tolerance of our community? A lot of the decisions are based on that, and it's not hard, clear data or science, and doesn't feel right or good, but there's also that perception of, the mask that works best is the one that you wear. That's kind of a guidance that we received before. So if they're not being worn well, they're not working anyway, especially the secondary level. And that's not a good answer, but I guess my point is that there's a lot of details and data and community perception and willingness to comply with mandates that are factors in the decision as well. So all of that melted into one decision is what this current guidance is based on. And if the board chooses to vote on a universal masking policy through April 15th, that's something you could make a motion for, and the board would have to vote on. But that's the only way, is to have a majority vote on a decision of that nature for universal masking. I understand everyone's perspective in this room very, very well, and I don't disagree with most of the points that have been made. So it's really hard. It's not an easy decision, and I understand it's very emotional, and it's a very passionate topic. And no matter what I say, I'm going to be wrong to somebody. So that's the best that I could give you. If there's other recommendations, Foster provided one for clarification on the fully vaccinated. If there's anything else on the letter, let me know. I would like to get this out tomorrow, along with notification that those tests are coming home tomorrow with their kids. It looks like Friday's probably, kids are watching this. I hope you're not, but it's pretty boring.
Mr. LePage,
But, yes.
I'm sorry, you
Mrs.
asked about
Cost?
clarification. So when you get a chance, I do just have one other point for clarification.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. You want to share that now, or?
If you're ready, I don't know.
I am.
No.
That's fine.
Just for clarification purposes, the letter, I thank you for writing it.
Welcome.
And it is well put together, and Foster, thank you for catching the point well taken about the vaccination. The only thing I would say is, for there to be clarity, how like when you have a PowerPoint and you have like the like a title page where it just kind of goes through and says boom, 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 like the 5 little takeaways from the letter.
Mm-hmm.
Because the letter is so long and involved, it would be nice to have something that parents can read real quick that just says, this, like the key points. Masks are optional, encouraged, or not encouraged. Please be respectful. Something, just the key things. Tests will be going home. We're encouraging you to take the test prior to school on Monday. just the little like PowerPoint nuggets to go
Yeah,
with.
in my
the-
email that introduces the letter, I'm sorry to cut you off. I do have those 4 bullet points at the top that
Okay.
share about, the key points.
Mhm.
But in my letter that goes home, when I introduce this letter, I'll explain it. There's a lot of detail in there and a lot of links. And I know personally getting those when there's 10 links in a letter, it's very frustrating because there's just so much in one letter. But
I
there's a lot that I need to share. So I'll highlight some key points when I send the letter home to the families tomorrow and
Yeah.
with the link.
I was thinking of English as a second language too, that it might get a little overwhelming to have, what I mean, that when you get that. But anyways, that was my thought about the letter. But otherwise, I do agree with Foster that yes, it's something that, we should accept and look forward to allowing the children to have the parents to have the choice, the parents and guardians. And I appreciate all the time and efforts that you've put into it. And I do respect that it's very scary. There's a lot of unknowns. And so I do respect my peers' perspectives. But that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Appreciate it. I don't know if any other board members have comments or questions, or if anyone wanted to make a motion or anything like that. Like I said, the only motion would be to vote on a masking requirement. I know you shared that.
Well, unless we approached it in a different way, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this is Rachel
Yes.
Buchanan. I would like to make a motion to add an action item at our March main meeting. And between now and then, to propose a policy that all COVID-related guidance and risk mitigation moving forward be approved by the Board of Education.
I don't know that we can do that. I mean, I don't think we could do that. Well, I'd have to speak to legal. I don't know where.
What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Buchanan?
I would just like to propose that we create a policy that all future related COVID guidance and risk mitigation be approved by the Board of Education moving forward. I can give the why behind it if that would help explain the reason for the motion.
Well, for what it's worth, I would be very much opposed to that because it would not allow me to do what I need to do in a timely manner to adjust to, the needs of the district as the leader of the district. And again, it's the separation of responsibilities that, in my opinion, that would not be appropriate.
Sorry, I'll provide.
Point of order, a point of order, Madam Chairman. This motion is not a topic that we will be discussing at the call of this meeting, and it would be inappropriate to have such a motion at this meeting.
So is this something that's not what the meeting is called for, basically? Is that what you're saying, Foster? She's not supposed to do motions.
Basically, we were to discuss basically the policy, not the policy, but the process regarding the removal of the mask mandate, not to change policies.
Okay. So then
well, it was just put on the table that there could be potentially to make a motion to create universal masking policy. So instead of creating universal masking policy, from what I hear from the voters is they're looking for the burden of proof scientifically to come back. So let me ask a question first. And this is why I was trying to understand what was guidance, what was recommendations, guidance, what was required versus the only thing that is a mandate or was through 228 was the mandate on masking. So moving forward, as far as risk mitigation, the reason I'm proposing it is to create an action item
Well,
between now and then.
At this point,
to
you're out of
create-
order because there is not even a motion on the floor and we're discussing a motion. To
Fair
properly
enough. Well, I was
discuss this,
making
you
a
would have to have a
motion.
motion. The motion have to be seconded. So if you're making the motion, that would be up to the chair to recognize that. And then someone would have to second that motion for a appropriate discussion to take place. So if that will be up to
Thank
the
you.
chair to decide if you had made a motion, and then is there a second to the motion, they could go forward with discussion. Other than that, it's out of order.
Thank you, Foster.
So does that mean it would be put up for discussion at another time?
No, what way to
I'm sorry,
run
I'm
things according to parliamentary procedure, i.e. Robert's rules. You
right.
discuss a motion. One, also the chair incidentally cannot discuss a motion, but that right now, do we have a motion on the floor? You would have to recognize that as the chair. Then next, would there anyone be seconding that motion? So that's what you have to do now. So are you recognizing that Mrs. Buchanan made a motion? And are we calling for a second to that motion? And is there anyone willing to make a second to that motion? If there is not, then that is totally a dead issue and we have to move forward with what we are really scheduled to do this evening.
Okay, so are you making a motion, Rachel?
Yes, I asked to be recognized by you, Madam Chair, to follow parliamentary procedures to make a motion to propose that between now and the next meeting, we create a policy that all COVID-related guidance and risk mitigation be approved by the Board of Education in the future. I wanted to create an action item for the March meeting to have that voted on after the policy was created.
Okay, and does anybody want to second that motion? So then that, I'm taking no, nobody wants to second the motion? Does anyone wish to second the motion? So unfortunately,
Madam Chair,
yes,
it's Cassandra. I would like to explore that at the next policy meeting. I think that would be warranted.
okay, I don't know that this is a motion that we're placing on the floor, so I don't.
Is that
Foster-
what Rachel's talking about? Rachel, are you talking about bringing that to the next policy meeting so that we can bring it to the?
Yes, I would like to, I'm making a motion to propose a policy that all COVID-related guidance and risk mitigation be approved by the Board of Education moving forward. And I would like to have that action item at our March Board of Education meeting. And in between then and now, yes, back to the policy committee because to my understanding, to create policy, the first step is what we're doing now, solicit feedback and guidance from our subject matter experts. We've done that. And then to create policy, the next step would be to go back to the policy committee, write said policy, and then bring it up for a vote. So all I am asking for is, we had an option to create universal masking policy. This is just going in a different direction. It's not to hinder or limit the superintendent. It is based on what the constituents and voters have said very strongly to me since November, is that they would like to have more oversight and the scientific burden be put back on the folks that are putting these mitigation and risk strategies into place, so that way they make sense moving forward. It's not to hinder or limit anyone, and it's to take it back to the policy committee, but I would like it as an action item on the March agenda.
So, excuse me, my question to someone, Foster, Becky, is this something that is this something that is,
This doesn't,
or
the motion doesn't make sense to me, but if there's been a motion made, if you're recognizing the motion and the second, then I would move the question and ask that the board vote on that motion.
Madam Chair,
I'm so confused, but we haven't gotten, it, have we?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just as a reminder, this would be something to add to the agenda, correct? So I believe that would take a 2/3 vote. So somebody would second, and then everybody votes. If somebody
Okay.
wants to second, if nobody wants to second, then it just dies here.
So if somebody makes a motion
So that was made. So you ask if anybody wants to second.
and it didn't see, I don't know that Cassandra's
That's-
was second. It was a
I
explore.
wasn't sure if it was gonna go to policy first.
Is anybody seconding the motion?
Nobody is seconding it, then I think we should move forward and with any other business.
I'll second the motion.
So
Then
now
I move the question.
we are going to remove the I'm
So
sorry.
I moved the question. That means we have to vote on it now.
Okay. So we're going to vote on it now. So we'll start. Foster,
I vote no.
Come on. Come on, Lori, where are you? Okay, yeah.
You're muted, Lori.
oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Deb.
Can everybody hear me? This is Joan.
Yeah,
All right, what we're gonna do is all right, Foster voted no. I'm gonna go down the list, and if everybody would just say yes or no, we'll move it along. Okay, Rachel? You made the motion, so you're a yes.
Thank you.
Cassandra, you're second? It's a yes, correct? Deb Hardy? Deb?
You're muted, Deb.
Muted.
Yes.
Becky Martinez?
No.
Becky Tyrell?
No.
Crystal St. Lawrence?
No.
Lori Peterson?
Yes.
And Lori Consalvo?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 5 yes votes, 4 no votes. It passed.
that's all.
Anything else tonight before we close, or I'm not sure if there are any other questions?
I have, Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Yes.
2 quick points. One, Cassandra said something, and I'm guessing she misspoke, but I just want to make it very clear. I'm sure ESL parents will have no problem reading Mr. LePage's paragraphs. We're all very used to the paragraphs. They go out in 4 languages, and I'm sure that people that speak multiple languages are more than enough to read them. And the second is I'd like to make a motion that we leave masks in place until April 15th. And we can collect more data. And quite frankly, we've gotten this information. I know the board has gotten information a couple hours before the meeting, and I'm asking questions, and I'm not getting, I know that it's new. There's a lot of new information to everybody, but it's concerning how
If you're making the motion, you make a motion, you don't discuss the motion. Point of order.
Okay, I'm making a motion to keep masks in place until April 15th and to revisit it then.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Motion fails. Thank you, Rebecca, for your motion.
Madam Chair, can I make a comment?
Yes, you may.
So first of all, this all brings us back to the fact that there are, when the superintendent was talking about this situation, there are no good decisions here. This is the way it's been for 2 years. There is very difficult to make any decision under these circumstances. And that is without a Board of Education that is obviously quite divided and going in 2 different directions. But it is very difficult to come up with a good answer. And just as a real point of clarification, about our survey that we did with the residents, with the families of Plainville. So just to clarify, we had, I want to say 1,100 people thereabouts respond. 44% of those people said remove the masks immediately. 27% said follow guidance, listen to what the state is telling you, and 30% said keep the masks. So if in reality, if you wanted to look at,
I'm sorry, Becky. Any percent said to keep it? I didn't hear you.
yep, 27% said use the state and Department of Health guidance. 30% said keep masks. So if you do the math on that, we have 44% of people saying remove masks and 56% thereabouts. It's a little split somewhere. We have an extra percent somewhere. Looking to say either keep masks or hold off, make a better decision or make a good decision for us to protect us. So I know there's people here who keep saying everybody wants the masks off. Well, I will tell you this, people who want masks off happen to be a lot louder than people who don't. That's just the way it goes. And there are a lot of people who have mixed feelings about this and aren't sure. That's probably that 27%. So to say that the majority of Plainville people who even voted here or Plainville citizens or a majority of anybody wants masks removed immediately today is not accurate. Okay. So let's stop saying that. And, this is very frustrating. This meeting has been very frustrating. And I don't know what you're going to do with that motion. People like Deb and Lori, I'm very disappointed because this is, if you want to take away, the superintendent's ability to run the district, you are in very, very grave danger of not only losing your superintendent, you're in very grave danger of really crippling the school district. So, this is beyond anything that you should even be discussing. We're not qualified to make these decisions. We are definitely not qualified to oversee what the superintendent wants to do and can do and should do in the buildings. That's just completely out of line. And I am done. If anybody else wants to talk.
I just think that the confusion came, for me anyway, when the governor had said that it needs to be made by the Board of Ed. That's where I think the confusion set in for me. So I think so many people interpreted what was said, and I kind of like their own manner. So for me, that's why I just kept asking, because I'm so unsure of what it really means. So that's why I kept asking, is this the way I'm understanding it? Is this the correct way of understanding it? Is this not the way they meant it? You know, there's so many open-ended discussions from the state when they're bringing in the BOE. So that's why I was so confused as far as, you know, is this something that we have a say in? Is it not something we have a say in? And then also for the fact that, you know, we have parents who are coming, you know, and asking us, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? Well, this is how I want it. You know, for me, I think the whole thing boils down to choice, and no one's forcing you to take your masks off, but people are forcing others to put their masks on.
You do know how
So
masks work, right, Lori? Sorry to be rude, but you do know how they work, right? If I wear my mask, I'm not protecting me. I'm protecting you. That's way.
really, because that's not what I
So
heard.
I'm done, Lori. I'm not.
I'm not trying to argue. I'm just saying everybody has a different opinion, and that's
Why don't
okay.
we get this meeting back into a parliamentary? This is just really
Are we just going to make a
now
motion?
become a totally unproductive meeting. And I just think that, you know, it just is, it's quite frankly, and sadly, it's out of control. And that is a shameful event.
Sorry, Foster, I am new. I do not know all the rules and the laws yet. So I'm asking at the same time, you know, what is supposed to be done? What is not supposed to be done? You know, are we taking a vote this evening? Are we not taking a vote this evening? I need to know what we need to get done.
We already took the vote, Lori, about accepting the superintendent's letter. That was done.
Then if there's nothing else, I guess we can make a motion to adjourn.
There's
I'm
two
sorry,
people with
this
their
is-
hands up.
I'm so sorry. This is Rachel Buchanan. I have my hand up. I guess I'm so flabbergasted at the confusion. I don't hear anyone here shouting unmask, or that's what the majority of people want. The only thing that I have heard and what I took from those surveys was optional and parents' choice. So I think we need to bring that back to center. No one is telling anyone else what to do, certainly not sharing our opinions on the matter, just making it optional like the mandate states. And there's been a lot of confusion between guidance and what's required. And asking questions doesn't mean, asking questions is a way of, that's how I learn, by asking questions. It's with no disrespect to anyone at all. So, you know, we have to be able to ask the questions. So optional is the whole point, not forcing folks to take their masks off. A cloth mask, 12% efficacy rate if worn correctly, and 95 fitted and worn correctly work. So we could debate all of that science all day long, but optional is really the point. That's why it's coming to an end. What people decide to do from there, all parents want is to be included in the conversation and for it to be a parent choice. Sounds like everybody else, superintendents, CPH, CDC, Board of Education, you know, parents just want to be included in that. And that's what's happening with the end of the mask mandate. And all we want to do moving forward is just have some more oversight. So that way we can, if this was to be kicked back to the Board of Education, and please correct us if we're wrong, if it wasn't kicked back to the Board of Education, I wouldn't even be proposing this motion. But because to my understanding that it was, you know, based on what the voters and the townspeople have asked, they just wanted to have more oversight that the future risk mitigation made sense from a scientific standpoint. It's not to be disrespectful or to be argumentative. Nothing is out of control. Thank you.
The only thing that went to boards was the decision about whether to implement a universal masking policy. End of story. That's what's done forever. Not every single decision about mitigations and how to manage a pandemic. That should not be run by Board of Education. I am insulted by that motion, so I'll leave it at that, and we'll go forward. And I'll send the letter tomorrow, and the board can decide what they want to do at the March meeting. That'll be completely up to you. And I'll stop now and Did anybody make a motion to adjourn?
I did, yes.
Motion to adjourn. I second that motion.
Now you vote on it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Thank you, John.
Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. And Julie.